let's say if in India you're struggling with anything, you just go to the gurus and the spiritual places. You go to the temple. That's the default thing that people resort to. So and
well, in India, people also can't afford to go to psychologists sometimes, which is why they go to the gurus because they're free
yes,
for the most part.
yes, that's another thing. But then there's also the idea that you were supposed to be doing this anyways.
Anyways, yeah.
So might as well now go and do the thing that you've been lacking on.
Yeah.
Lacking on to some extent. But the bigger distinction I think is or the bigger debate that exists, it's about the dualism versus monoism sort of thing. So the dualism is a philosophy that sort of sees, in the most simplest terms, sees mind and body as a different thing. As in, like, you have this mental phenomena and you also have the body. And they're distinct. Or also you can also see it as the spirit or the soul as being different from the body itself.
Yeah.
But
if there is duality in a human being, it often might lead to conflict between those two dualities.
Yes. Yeah. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But we had this question in class about what's the difference between holism and monism. So here's the answer that I had, or that I could think of on the spot. So holism sort of takes this gestalt approach, saying that the total is more than the parts.
The parts, the sum of its parts.
The sum of its
That's
parts.
a very collectivist approach to it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, what monism is sort of saying is that there are no parts.
Yeah.
So this whole distinction of parts making something bigger, you don't have to think about it this way. The whole thing is one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the bigger
what
debate.
camp do you think Eastern philosophies lean more towards?
Weirdly, they're more monism focused.
Yeah.
Not the contemporary ones. So that's the problem that we sort of fall into, because
the contemporary ones have been diluted a bit by Western philosophy, which might have molded them more towards the holistic or the whole thing instead of the monotropic thing.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even say that it's the West influencing it. I think naturally they might have also gone towards that direction because it's sort of simpler to understand from a mind. Because if you're trying to understand the monoistic all is one, the Ekonkar, the Namaste, the Satnams of the world, it becomes incredibly complex for you to understand in just regular ways, because when you look around the world yourself, you see different objects, and these objects are essentially tools that you use. So in itself, everything is this constrained thing that allows you to do specific things with it. So it seems natural to apply that to your body as well. Like your hand is a tool that you use.
I guess it leaves very little room for the role of something changing as time goes on.
Yes, yeah.
Because if the things around you have the same role, then your role can't change, because change in you has to be linked to change around you.
Why, can you elaborate on that?
Say for example, we'll talk. Yeah, let's talk about just human beings. I'm imagining what was the word
monoism.
Monoism seems to best be in my head. I'm visualizing it as a monolith, a chain link, if you might, if you can say. And now in a chain link, the links themselves can't really change without
the chain
changing or the links around it changing.
Right, so you have to see the whole thing, and you can't take one part out.
You can't take one part. Yes, and if we apply that to human society, that a human society that is that monolithic, then yes, if people around you don't change, then you can't change.
Yes,
which leaves very little room for human growth and
yeah, I see.
Change.
Like if you look at a societal level, yes, I think that's true.
Yeah.
If you're trying to affect change, you can't
Also-
just change one person.
yeah. Also that if the monolithic design of this thing might also, you could also see that in our caste system.
The monolithic design in what way? Like all you need all the different castes to make the society function.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Another chain link.
Yes, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, that's more like if you're looking at it from a societal level.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at it from an individual level,
Yeah.
it's mostly about, again, I'm like reducing it down to an individual, because the philosophy is supposed to take in the whole universe and yourself as a part of it. But even if you apply it to an individual in itself, there is more than enough reason to believe that you have to see it as one giant thing instead of different parts. And there's so much evidence for it, like even like scientific, if you want to use that word. Here's an interesting one that does not even relate to your mind. So the thing with your muscles, right? So one way to understand muscles is that it's just the strand that takes from one joint to another that helps you articulate that particular joint. And the physiotherapists had been working based off of this idea for a lot of time. But then they soon realized, or recently realized, that there is also this fascia that exists. It's like this web that you have. It's not muscles, but it's this other sort of connective tissue that connects all different muscle groups together. So what sometimes happens is, if the fascia itself is constricted, let's say on your like lower back on the right hand side, it pulls throughout your body. So it's not that particular muscle being tense. It has an effect all throughout your body. So sometimes if somebody has a headache.
So you're saying acupuncture is real?
I know that's not what I'm saying. If it's real or not, well, it obviously is real because it exists.
It exists, yeah.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that even on like the muscular level,
Yeah.
you have to see the whole body, because many times what happens is, if somebody has a headache or somebody has tight neck muscles, you can keep working on those neck muscles for as long as you want, doesn't help. But fixing their lower back helps can help their neck muscles in a lot of cases. Somebody has poor posture, it's not, you can't just keep correcting their posture, you have to find the link. Sometimes it could be in your legs where the fascia is sort of constricted because of that particular muscle, and it has cascading effects throughout the whole thing. So it's very easy to see, when you're like bodybuilding, you do these isolateral exercises where you take one muscle group and you keep exercising that, but that doesn't work for if you want all of your muscles to grow. It's a very, again, holistic sort of thing where you have to train the bigger muscle groups because they are the ones responsible for releasing that testosterone, which helps all the other muscles grow. So even purely physically speaking, if you remove the mind from this whole thing, you have to take the whole thing in context, and you can't just take one thing and work on it. And there's that. But if you, let's say, were to take the mind into it, the whole idea that the brain is the part of it is, you're sort of decapitating the person, because the central nervous system includes the brain, the spinal cord, and all the peripheral nerves that sort of come out of it. So it makes total sense to take the whole thing into account.
If you're talking about the central nervous system, it also includes the 5 senses, and one of those senses is all of your skin.
Which is all of your skin, yes. And then you also have the gut, which we're increasingly finding out has a huge influence on everything. Specifically, the more easier thing to point to is the cravings that you have for food. Apparently, it's the type of bacteria that you have in your gut, and how that bacteria is feeling will influence what types of food you're craving.
Very symbiotic relationship.
And also the whole idea of the gut feeling thing is somehow turning out to be a real thing, where you have some, I don't know, it seems like a crazy fluke that people said I have this gut feeling because they probably felt it there. I'm sure the microbes aren't releasing a
specific, because the microbes don't experience
they're not
reality, anxiety.
I don't think I can feel the microbes in me, but maybe it was a fluke where you can actually feel something in your stomach region, and then you say it's my gut feeling, but it actually is a very real thing. So from a mind body perspective, even taking a more scientific approach, you can say that yes, you have to take the whole thing into account. But then the monoism of the Eastern sort of philosophies, and I'm talking about the non-dualistic. It's interesting, they don't call it monoistic, they call it non-dualistic, which I think has a connotation to itself. It's more a rejection of the dualist than saying that we are a thing in itself. I think that's how I understand it. But that has to do with the integration of the person with the whole of the universe and existence in itself. Now here's the kicker, or here's sort of like the basic way to outline this. So the dualistic perspective will say that you have sort of the individual, you have the self,
Mm-hmm.
and then within that there is the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your body,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is a part of you that is experiencing, and the experience lies within it.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the camp will say that you have the experience, therefore you have the individual,
Mm-hmm.
and then within the individual you have another type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they're sort of saying there in like a Venn diagram way of looking at it.
The reality probably lies somewhere in the middle, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, reality lies everywhere. So I don't think it's one or the other. It sort of does
Yeah.
permeate everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference here, if I'm was to compare the West and the East in the way I understand it, is that the East, what they're trying to say is that you have the experience and you have the individual. That's fine,
Mm-hmm.
but then every individual also has an experience inside of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is accessible to that individual
Mm-hmm.
and is common to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the big shift,
Mm-hmm.
because if you go to the more traditional Indian teachings of the way of life,
Mm-hmm.
it's always about realizing that internal experience. And then I think like the mindfulness also sort of like clubs in to this thing of noticing yourself, like noticing the experience that you have within yourself
Mm-hmm.
as a path to understanding reality and yourself, and a path towards liberation or moksha, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so if you look at this from, like, say if you were to make a Venn diagram
Mm-hmm.
of this structure,
Mm-hmm.
the center would be the what do you think the center would be? Would it be the first-hand experience that an individual has, or is it their personalities, like the internal, holistic, shared, collective experience?
I think
Is that where humanity or an individual starts and expands from there?
yeah.
Okay.
And I think they would say that the experiencer is the first thing,
Yeah.
but it's okay. Here's the thing. So the idea, this we're just gonna jump the gun and get to the Atman Brahman situation here, because that's what I've been sort of struggling with,
Yeah.
trying to put my finger on it, or like how they came up with these ideas and
Yeah.
what they mean by it. So the Brahman, which sounds like the Brahman,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds like basically the universe,
Mhm.
or you can call it reality,
Mhm.
everything that exists.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not exactly what it means.
Mm-hmm.
The Brahman is supposed to be something that permeates everything and which is the true reality.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with dualism is that everything exists in context to one another,
Mm-hmm.
which is why there is the idea is that there's no truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm talking to you,
Everything is relative.
everything is relative. Like I am talking to you because you are talking to me.
Yeah.
And also this also has I have a physical understanding of it too. So if you say that A happened to be,
Mm-hmm.
like it's that causal chain of events,
Mm-hmm.
but the A is not the causation.
Mm-hmm.
A and B both are what caused the event. So if I throw a ball from here and it hits another ball B, you can very easily say that the A was something that hit B,
Mm-hmm.
but the A was only able to hit B because the B existed there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you take a more Newtonian sort of cause effect understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that is in many ways missing the point, because if you, I mean, it helps with the math for sure, but it's missing the point because you can't have the A hitting the B without the B being there.
Mm-hmm.
They're both hitting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Just because one thing is moving towards the other doesn't
Mhm.
mean that is what is causing the effect. They're both there.
Mm-hmm.
If you have two planets colliding, they're both attracting one another with that gravity. If you have the
Mhm.
moon circling around the earth,
Mm-hmm.
the moon also has its gravity, which is why it's circling, and the earth
Are
also
you,
has
are, you,
its
are you
gravity.
trying to link gravity to the Brahmin?
No, I'm not
philosophy?
linking
or,
gravity.
or is the grand unified field theory really?
Yes, I mean, like if you have to unify everything, you have
Yeah.
to take every single
Yes,
atom or every
everything.
single
That,
object.
see,
in
that
the-
just sounds like Star Wars to me. Are you gonna start talking about midi-chlorians now?
I don't know what that is.
The Force.
I wish I did. Yes, in some. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like it's
So George Lucas got the idea of Star Wars is the Force from Brahmins.
these people have been getting these ideas from the Brahmins from.
Well, to be honest, Star Wars itself was apparently based off of Akira Kurosawa movie about 7 samurais.
Okay. Yeah.
Also very Eastern.
Yeah, very Eastern. Makes sense. Yeah, so that's the non-dualists are sort of rejecting this contextual world, because if everything is dependent upon another thing, so what is that exists when there are no objects?
Mm-hmm.
So the Brahman essentially is what exists outside of the known and the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we have the known universe, known set of facts, ideas that we have known or we figured out. We maybe figured it out with our senses, or maybe we figured out through inquiry, whatever. We figured that out, that's it. Then there is also the huge set of things that are unknown that we are working towards finding out, or things that we might not be able to understand because of our limited senses, limited time, all sorts of things. But again, all of these things are contextual. What exists outside of it? What is the true reality? What is truth? Okay, what is the most reliable piece of information that we can use or we can ascribe to existence and reality in itself? So if you keep going back and forth on this question, you come down to the problem of the self-realization thing, that the knife cannot cut itself. So how do you understand a thing that is causing everything but is also not interacting with anything at the same time? So the idea here is that from the known and the unknown, the only thing that mediates between those things or is outside of it is the knower.
The observer?
It's not the observer, it's the knower.
Okay.
It's the seeker.
Okay.
So in some ways the seeker itself, the thing that is trying to mediate between these two things, is the thing that is outside of these two things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that thing which in our conversation lies within the person.
Yeah.
So the Brahman this concept that lies within the person is called the Atma, which is this awareness that we have. So the idea is that the Atma is the Brahman, because that is the only thing that exists outside of it. So the Brahman exists within us. It's like the Kung Fu Panda scroll kind of thing, where it is inside of you, and you are the Brahman. But an easier way to understand this, and you will hear this from physicists all the time, is that when they are trying to look at consciousness and what it is and try to describe it, the best description that they can get, or the one that sticks the most, at least with me, or with a lot, or resonates with a lot of people, is that consciousness is a way of the universe learning about itself. You know, they come to this conclusion, that you must have heard this thing.
Yes, I think therefore I am.
I think therefore I am is a very different thing.
Okay.
But when they're trying to see what is consciousness, they say that in some ways because they understand that the consciousness also developed from the universe itself. Like it's not separate from it.
Like the universe itself, the universe needed consciousness to develop and ask that question.
Yeah. I don't think it needed it. I'm not ascribing like a personal anthropomorphic quality to the universe, but in some ways, if you think about it, the conscious person who is doing the sciences and trying to learn about the universe is also the universe itself, right? Like you've not been dropped into it.
Yeah.
You came out of it.
Yeah.
So consciousness is a way for the universe to learn about itself. So I think that's the best way to understand this Atman Brahman thing, where the awareness is also a part of the universe, but it also allows you to understand about the universe. So I think that's what is happening here. Now, if you ask me like, how is this useful? That sounds like a whole nother conversation. But the reason why this is supposedly useful is because once you understand that you are everything, there's a cascade of potentially therapeutic understandings, realizations that flow along with it. So if you understand that you are a part of everything, this distinction that you have between yourself and other people fades away immediately, and also between you and other objects, because we're like not a tree, and your feet aren't sticking to the ground at all times. You see yourself as an independent entity who is doing its own thing or is affecting the universe. But you have to understand that you also came from the ground. Like your atoms came from the planet. All of these things. Every neuron that you have is made from the same materials, and it came naturally out of it. So you are not really apart from the system. You are very much apart. You are the system yourself. So there is essentially no distinction between me and you sitting here. And if I were to stretch it further, no distinction between me and this laptop that I have in my lap. Because all of these things are part of the same. So it is all one in the same way. So that has to make you more compassionate towards other people. I think this realization has to work in the favor of making you less angry, resentful towards events that are happening when it comes to other people.
Sure, but that might apply to some human beings. On the other hand, there are other human beings that are so misanthropic they hate themselves. How would you...
If somebody hates themselves,
Yeah.
I think that'll have to depend on why they hate themselves in the first place. Because hating yourself can be a very personal or a unique thing.
Yeah.
Or like with misanthropic, you mean like hates humanity in general?
In general, so much that they also hate themselves for being a human being.
Yeah, and they would say that person is misguided because they are seeing humanity as a separate entity that's doing its own thing, but it's not really doing its own thing. It's part of the same laws, part of the same functions. So, okay, here's the thing.
Well, it's not... Okay, I from a metaphysical perspective, I see what you mean, but at this point, just because the vast number of humans in the world, you can't really see it all as one coherent organism. As an individual, that has become impossible to see, because the level of difference between the experience that one human being might have of the world versus what another human being might have is so catastrophically huge.
Yes, but the idea here is that even though the experience is different and the set of objects and events that they have witnessed is different, the witnessing capacity is shared. So there is something that unites us all in this thing. So the concept is that if you understand that the witnessing capacity is something that we all share, and that witnessing capacity in itself is something that's pure and the same throughout. There's no difference in the witnessing capacity. So what you witness might be different, how you interpret those things might be different, what you think is right, wrong, your decision making might be different, but the fact that you have this flashlight, sort of like the lights are on and you can see these things, that is common among all of us. And we are using that in good ways and bad ways, right ways, wrong ways, in ways that increase suffering in the world or decrease suffering in the world in different ways. That's there, but then there is this shared underground commonality that we have. That's what I understand might be a positive or a therapeutic use of understanding this concept, which seems to be experientially true in terms of understanding that there is an awareness that we all have, and that is shared between humans, which also might be shared with other animals as well, and also with even and the commonality or the same origin of the objects with the universe. So sort of like extending this idea onto inanimate things as well. So that has to have a positive effect. Now, for example, apparently the Japanese people also have this word for namo that we have, which is to surrender to the other entity in some ways. And from what I learned is that they can sort of use that concept or that understanding to deal with natural disasters. So when they have the tsunami and so forth. So the idea is that you don't surrender, but you respectfully accept the rhythm of the nature and the universe. So this greater power. So you can call this. It doesn't have to be God, but the laws.
That would only apply to disasters or adverse circumstances that are purely based off of natural causes.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Because you're seeing natural causes as different from human actions. But only if you had this enlightenment, this idea or this understanding
that everything... See, if that thought process actually worked or was digestible to people, to humanity, we would have been in a better place as a society than we are now.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying this is, well, I don't think anybody said that this is easy to attain and easy to maintain at the same time. They don't make a light of it. There is a strong emphasis on the fact that this is very hard to attain, of having this deep rooted understanding of this way of looking at the world, and even harder issue of maintaining it at the same time. How many stories do we have of yogis who were distracted and then lost their sadhana after X number of years, right? So they don't make a light of this, but this is something that you are supposed to strive towards, because it helps you understand that everything is working based off of the rhythm. That's a good word that I learned today. You can call that the natural laws.
Yeah.
Which I totally agree with. The natural laws are there, very testable, very validated, very reliable, extremely reliable. You can test with your senses, you can test with instruments, so on and so forth, and consistent throughout the universe. Also unchangeable by human will. You cannot change a natural law. You can't change the strong force between an atom. You can't change or make anything to make materials behave differently as compared to how they would with their natural properties. So at some point you have to understand that all of this is out of your hands. Like everything is out of your hands. You can try, but then the person who is trying is also a part of the same substrate. So
if we bring that thought process to a more religious lens, there's obviously a couple of verses in the Ramayana about, well, not the Mahabharata about that, or
in the Gita,
Gita specifically, the Gita part of the Ramayana.
Of the Mahabharata.
Of the Mahabharata. See,
Yes.
So confused.
About the karma and then like the nishkam karma.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's sort of representing the same idea.
Same idea. Yeah.
It's just replaced.
So God is a easier way to digest this idea.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just easier to say that there is this anthropomorphic entity that is all powerful, and not just powerful, but it is everything.
And we can also connect that to verses from the Bible. So there is a verse in the Bible that says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So,
what do you think that means?
Well,
you think it's espousing the same idea?
It's espousing a very similar idea.
Yeah. It's almost moot to be trying to see yourself as this extra natural superpower.
Or a portion of an extra natural collective superpower being a part of you and a part of everything around you.
Yeah. So in some ways it all makes sense if you really dig deep. I mean, like, we're literally standing on the shoulders of giants because people have debated these for centuries at this point.
Yeah.
And this philosophical thought, and because also what's interesting is that vocabulary also grew with these thoughts at the same time. So if you look at the Vedas, you can see how language was developing as they were sort of writing these books. I mean, I'm not saying that
has to be there has to be a circular effect there.
Yes, I'm not saying that the books allowed them to increase their vocabulary, but both these things were happening at the same time.
Because you would have to come up with words for novel concepts.
Yes.
And you would have to also come up with words to explain novel concepts.
Explain said novel concepts. Yeah. So the foundation has been laid out for us.
Yeah.
And what's sort of sad is that we have to go back and rediscover these things because we've had a very long period of history where all this was sort of forgotten because the world changed dramatically in the past, I would say 200 years. Like the change is so dramatic. It has a very destabilizing effect on it, and we're seeing the repercussions or the negative effects of this as we go along. But yeah, that's the best summary I can sort of provide of what the non-dualistic idea is. The non-dualistic idea also helps you understand how nothing matters other than the things that matter. And the things that matter are outside of your hands. So the best bet is to just enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
And it also does a great job in extinguishing the fear of death in some ways, because if you really understand yourself as part of everything, you being born and alive and not alive sort of meld into one another. Now, there is obviously a very obvious fact that you don't want this experience to end.
Yeah.
Because a prerequisite to living is the fear of death. You, evolutionarily speaking, you will not have any animal survive any number of years and continue to have babies and populations if that animal inherently did not have a fear of death. Person without a fear of death, any animal without it died, couldn't have babies. It's a very simplistic explanation. But I think that is in one way where you're using your intellect to try to overcome your biological drives, which is something that we do all the time. So if, let's say, if you know that eating Cheetos 5 times a week or a day is bad for you, you are trying to suppress your biological drive, because in itself the biological drive still stands, but you can use your sort of intellect and your understanding and the information that you've gathered to try to suppress it. So the fear of death...
intellect can also be self-destructive, where it wants you to eat 5 bags of Cheetos a day.
Yes, you can use that to rationalize as well.
Yeah.
Which is why, dude, here's the thing, that this is what I'm trying to understand, is that this sort of knowledge or this type of inquiry, you cannot have it without a very lived experience or practice of it at the same time.
Yeah.
This is definitely not something that you can read and understand and try to do a test with and be done with it. Or this is not a set of facts. This is specifically...
It's a set of practices.
It is a set of practices.
Yeah.
Yes. They specifically go at extreme lengths to indicate or to make it very clear that this is not something that you can talk about. This is not something that you can use your senses to understand. This is something that has to be experienced and lived with. So, which is why when you said that the intellect can be used to rationalize improper decisions, so you can sort of take this idea and then say that every one of my actions in itself are coming from the universe itself. I am God, and or the God and I are one. So if I go ahead and commit mass murder, that is the universe's force. So I am exempt from this. Which is why you have to take all the supplementary. You have to read the fine print, right? You have to take it in this very structured. Like you have to take the whole thing.
Yeah.
You can't cherry pick the parts from it to justify whatever you want to do. But yeah, there's that. Do you have any more questions?
See, the thing is, this is so... This thought process is so diametrically opposite to practical human reality.
Is it though?
I mean, yes, it is. People cherry pick not just the facts, but the reality that they want to believe. You really trust people to be able to not do that and look at everything holistically?
Yeah, but I would say they do this at their own peril.
They definitely do it at their own peril, but that still doesn't
stop them.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever stopped anyone.
Yeah.
People do things at their own peril at all times.
What I'm trying to drive towards is, if this specific philosophy, or if this interpretation of this philosophy was accurate, then why are we not as a living force, part of a larger living force, part of the universe, not headed closer towards this form of thinking now? Why are we driving away from it so vehemently?
I honestly think there's a resurgence happening.
I think there's a resurgence happening, okay.
Or I think it's inevitable.
Okay.
To some point. I'm seeing a lot of gurus popping up in the Western sphere. You have these intellectuals or pseudo-intellectuals, as some people like to call them.
Theologians have been popping up all the time. The theologians coming up is nothing new, because people do need somebody to tell them how to live, because it's easier.
Yes,
To
but
hear somebody
this is
else.
I think we now have a new class of people who are taking a more nuanced understanding of it. When you say theologian, the idea that comes to your head is somebody like a priest or somebody who is
Not necessarily.
orthodoxly.
A theologian can be anybody that.
Yeah, no. What I mean is like they represent the orthodoxy, right?
Not necessarily.
No, they don't have to.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that's the idea that comes to my mind when you
Sure,
say
but
theologian.
the gurus that you talk about, the ones that are coming up right now, are not the.
Do you think Richard Dawkins is a theologian?
Anybody that believes in something that
Strongly.
passionately.
Yes. And people flock to him like crazy, right? Like you had the new age atheists were extremely, what do you call it, potent.
Yeah.
In what they were able to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
But right now there's a very strong pushback against it. Like you can see it in the political substrate. Like America just elected Trump, and that has to indicate some I don't want to call regression, but sort of going back towards the more Christian values of the old time safety of using this structure, this value structure. So I think people are, and you see that in India too. If they're doing it effectively, or if they're really doing the nuanced inquiry and trying to go back to the roots of their sort of religious practices, I don't think so. But the people are trying to go in that direction. This whole rightward shift that we see politically across the world, I think is an indication of sort of like the resurgence of people wanting to go back to these forms of thinking.
But the problem arises when people think they want to go back to their versions of this form of thinking, because everybody has their own version of
yes,
this. Just because that is happening doesn't just because I want to regress back to what I think was the correct way of living doesn't mean my way of living was correct.
That's true. Also, people have had these debates or differences in their versions all the time. We never had a understood or non-evolving or an absolute version of any of these things. It was always sort of in fight with one another. I had this point that I was trying to make, but I've sort of, it skipped my mind, and this is really troubling me. But yeah, what were you saying about the different, like just say the whole thing again?
Let me go back to it. So you're saying this this shift back towards what you might say classical beliefs or more conservative beliefs, according to has a according to me might not necessarily be, I guess, correct, or might not. Essentially what I'm trying to say is everybody has their own version of even these conservative beliefs, and people graft those onto the beliefs of, say, a political candidate or even a guru, and assume that to be the truth. There is no one unifying absolute truth.
Right. Okay.
That they
now I remember
follow.
what I remember what I was trying to say. So this is somewhere where my understanding has sort of changed over the years. So for example, when I was listening or reading to personality theories, and everybody had a different personality theory, right? You had the psychoanalysts, the Maslows of the world, the existentialists, phenomenologists, all these people. Everybody had a different personality theory or their view of humans, of what does it mean to be human, what are humans actually doing, how are they construing their themselves and people around them, how do they understand it, what do they want, what causes psychopathology, so on and so forth. And then as I was going through these large chapters in the textbook, I realized that everybody is saying different things, but everybody is so consistent in the way they are presenting it, that everybody has addressed all the major questions that need to be addressed to form this sort of this fabric that has no holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
So the understanding I got from it is that these understandings have to be self-consistent. They don't have to be interoperable.
Yeah.
Between people.
Yeah.
Right. So that was my idea, that you can construct a fabric for yourself, an understanding, a philosophy, as long as the whole thing doesn't have holes in it and it works within itself. You can use that to live an amazing life.
But so the fact that they're not interoperable with other philosophies is going to be a source of friction every single time.
Yes, I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
That's what I understood.
Yeah.
And the idea that I got with it is that you have to let go of the friction. You have to let go of the fact that people have different understandings, and that's okay, because everybody has their unique understanding.
See, humanity has tried to do that again and again and again, but failed every single time.
I know. Let me finish the thing.
That is the only consistency.
I know. I'm getting to it. So my understanding was that this is the message that needs to be thrown out. Is that, hey, listen up. People or societies or cultures are gonna have different understandings. As long as they have their self-consistent one that helps them survive in their context, it's fine. You don't have to fight them over this. You just have to understand that everybody's trying their best.
But what if somebody else's self-consistent society has a tenant where they have to consistently be at conflict with everybody else and spread their own tenets?
That we'll get to that later. that is a much bigger question. That is more about the applicability of it. I'm being very theoretical about this thing right now. That is what I understood what the message was. The way my understanding has changed is as I've looked into these personality theories over time, or looked at these ideas or schools of thoughts over time. What I am now understanding is that they are not self-consistent but interoperable. They are all saying the same thing, but in different ways. And that's a big shift that I'm noticing. It was wrong of me to assume that these are separate things but consistent, but instead they're all looking at the same exact thing but from different lenses. So there is a very real possibility of unification,
convergence.
Not convergence. You don't have to converge, but you can get that sense of unity and that sense of homogeneity, even though it doesn't exist on the surface. Because if all of these things in their own ways are answering the same question, right, how can they be different? Because the questions are the same. So if the question is what causes human suffering, for example, and you have 5 different answers to them, and all of them work to some extent, that means they're the same thing.
No.
Okay, do you mean, are you trying to say that human suffering
not
is
if they all work in every context and in and of themselves, because you said they all work to some extent, that can't, no. If they all work to answer every single permutation of the original question asked, then they might be self-consistent and say the same thing across the board. But if they only fulfill some of the requirements or answer only some of the permutations of the original question, then they don't have to be congruent in and of themselves.
Yeah, so they all work. That's the dodo
in your hypothetical.
No. So that's the dodo bird conclusion of psychotherapy.
Okay.
Most research.
Yeah.
Or it's sort of very sad to admit this, but turns out it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which school you belong to. Here, if you, like, there's no one psychotherapy that's better than the other. There is not one school of thought or one way of performing psychotherapy that is more efficient than the other. Even though we have all these different schools, very different from one another, completely different ideas of the world and of human beings. If you put them into practice at a large scale, there's no difference.
But is that because when you put it at a large enough scale, balances out the efficiencies of every single?
No, I'm not saying it balances out that people will flock towards the one that works for them. No, that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
If you just randomly do it,
it
doesn't matter which one you're doing.
As long as you're talking to people, it's fine.
Yes. So what becomes more important at that point is the alliance and the working relationship and the fact that you're working on it. So as long as you're doing it, it works. Which one you're doing does not matter per se. Like I mean, obviously, like there has to be the connection between the therapist and the person. That is more important. But there is no definitive type of psychotherapy that is better than another type of psychotherapy.
So it's the ritual that matters, not the act itself.
I think it's deeper than that. I think what this indicates is that they are not different. Because they're all answering the same question. They're all the same thing. That's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like if you have what's the fundamental question? You can have the fundamental question of living and dying.
Mm-hmm.
You have the fear of death and you have a desire to live.
Mm-hmm.
Every form of therapy will address on this question one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Now there might be some that address this. For example, the existentialists would say that therapy would be incomplete unless you have this conversation with your client
Mm-hmm.
about their relationship with death, or without understanding that this is the real problem of the client always, no matter what they're presenting with. But the real problem is always the concern of their mortality. You might have those existentialists who might focus on that, but it doesn't mean that the other ones who don't explicitly mention it are not tackling that question through other means.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that they're not. So even when it comes to religions or more philosophical living based understandings of existence, what I'm trying to say is that they're not self consistent and interoperable. They're all the same, because they all answer the same question, because all humans are same, because of the awareness that is shared between all of us, because that's one fact that you cannot deny is shared or the same.
Sure, but you see the shared part of the human psyche that you're talking about is the base human psyche, the thing that we begin with. Everything else that's put on top of that is not shared.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can assume that humanity or the human experience has some congruency throughout the board, but that the percentage of that congruency is way smaller than the percentage of the incongruency, because of
Yes,
the
I understand what you're saying.
varied amount of experiences that people have.
Yes, I understand that question.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that the experiences are going to be so widely different, is that your worldviews the shared part is a lot smaller
Yeah.
than the other.
Yeah. I get
But
why Eastern philosophy wants to emphasize the shared part of the human experience, because that seems like that would lead to a more coherent and empathetic society.
No, I don't think. Yeah, so see, so that what you're espousing is a more top-down view, saying that
Sure.
somebody says do this because this is more beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I more understand most of these large-scale societal phenomena as a bottom-up approach, no
Mhm.
matter what the phenomena is.
Mm-hmm.
I think people try things out,
Mm-hmm.
and then some things stick or work better than others, and that's
Mhm.
what we get.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say that the worldviews are different because the experiences are different, of
Mhm.
course, somebody living in South America has no idea of an indigenous person living in the tundra.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that point, but the way I am understanding it now is that no matter what the experiences are,
Mhm.
they are all an offshoot or a representation of the same basic desires and fears. So both of these people fear losing a loved one, let's say, or
Mhm.
fear dying itself.
Mhm.
Let's go down to the basic.
Mhm.
So all actions that they're doing,
Mhm.
all of them,
Mhm.
every single action will have a connotation of, is this gonna kill me or not?
Mhm.
And that goes to everything. So for example, if you wake up and you're brushing your teeth, you know it's not gonna kill you, that's why you will do this.
Mhm.
So that understanding of doing safe things that don't hurt you, or that don't pinch, even like sensory, right? You know that if I stub my toe, it's gonna hurt me. That is a huge part of you
Mhm.
that you're not thinking of cognitively,
Mhm.
but on an intuitive level, that is what is sort of deciding every movement that you make.
Mhm.
So I would say that the shared part is a lot bigger
Mhm.
than the differences.
Mhm.
Like that's where I'm getting at, because I think the questions are the same, the basic problems are the same,
Mhm.
the understandings are the same, because the questions are the same. Even if the answers sound different, they have to be the same answer if they work. I mean, if you have an answer that does nothing and completely obliterates you, that answer is not going to exist long enough. I mean, yes, no, they actually don't exist long enough. Come on, man.
But they do seem to arise again and again.
They
and
do seem
again.
to rise. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
evolution, right? You get
Yeah.
a large enough group of anything,
Yeah.
you'll have things popping off and
Yeah.
on and on. Like you have all sorts of cults, but they
Yeah.
always die off. That's the whole beauty of a cult.
Yeah, but
Dies
they,
fantastic. You hear about you.
But they do seem to arise again and again and again, and generally stronger than the last one.
Maybe not. Maybe it's the whole part of the rhythm of the whole thing.
Like what? Eventually, we are all headed towards chaos and entropy.
Yes, that could be another. No, the chaos and entropy thing is it's much broader than the scale that we're talking about.
Because you're talking about a unified force in a universe that is headed towards.
Yes, I mean like if you
chaos.
if you look at it at the very 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 macro scale.
Yeah. Which is what we're trying to do. We're looking at it from
Yeah.
a macro scale.
Yeah.
Macro scale.
I really think physics can be an excellent way for getting a life philosophy. Like, I mean, like, I think I do that a lot. I think you do that to a large extent as well. Of using just basic facts or cosmological inquiry to understand our place in the universe. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, a lot would say is what caused the whole
Also sounds
the crisis.
that sounds a lot like astronomy or astrology. Sorry.
Astrology. No, that's not what I mean. But like, like because the problem is when you take a scientific explanation of something, we take that as being more true, even though we have no understanding of what it actually means.
And obviously, the more time-tested answers
Yes.
are the philosophical ones
Yeah.
or the religious ones.
Yeah. I mean, even with I'll tell you how much we don't understand physics at a deeper level. You know the double slit experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you heard that being used to explain or justify an opinion such as the consciousness is causing reality? You've heard that, right?
Yeah, but that's not the same.
But that's not what's happening at all.
No.
The basic thing is that if you're trying to see what do you mean by an observer, the observer isn't a person looking at it. The observer means that light is hitting that electron and coming back to something. So if you hit the thing, it moves it. And then it moves it in a specific way that collapses the wave function. Now, again, I don't know what collapsing of the wave function means, but essentially it means that it goes from a probabilistic place to a definite place, because now you don't even know if it's actually definitive, but that's the place where you see it. So the probability cloud has sort of collapsed. So now you have an idea, but again, doesn't mean that the probability cloud didn't exist in the first place.
Yeah.
So there was a probability of where it might be. So if you're trying to calculate without seeing it, you have to use probabilities of where this very tiny particle might be. But if you hit it with something, now you have a definitive place. Now, how this translates to the thing going from both the slits versus one slit, I'm not too sure about it, but nothing crazy is happening here. So using physics can be a great way, but we take that as a superstition more than anything in many places. But here's a good example. So again, the Morita therapy lens. So they have they see this as a bilaterality of fear and desires. So the concept is that if you have fear of death on one side and the desire for life on the other one. So therapeutically speaking, a fear of failure is the same thing as the desire for success. So what they're saying is that both, again, like the more unified,
very yin and yang.
Yes, the more unified version of it, right? So the fear of death is the exact same thing as the desire for life. You can't separate these two things out. You can't have one without the other. So the fear of failure is the same as the desire for success.
You can look at this from a dualist model, or you can look at it from a...
Yes, we're making this into two categories to understand them, but
it's not two categories, it's one thing.
Yeah, it's one thing because you can't have one without the other, right? So therapeutically speaking, how this can help is that if you have somebody who is really fearful of failure, instead of focusing on that fear of failure, which you might do, you can also focus on their desire for success and work on that, because that will inadvertently also tackle the other thing, which is not really the other thing but the exact same thing at the same time. So if you have a fear of rejection, that could be seen as a desire for acceptance and inclusion. If you have anticipatory anxiety, that could be seen as a desire for safety or a desire for certainty.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the concept being that they're both the same thing. You can't really separate those two things out. So in some ways, if you separate them and see these as two distinct bubbles,
Mm-hmm.
and you start working on the one thing without even considering the other one,
Mm-hmm.
in a more extreme case, you are sort of bound to fail, or you might not be as effective.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take this concept and keep expanding it to the point where it starts encircling the whole person, the person with the person's psyche with the body,
Mm-hmm.
and then that person's body with their social circles, with their family, then their social circles, then their community, and you can like keep expanding it to the point. So you can sort of take this lens to expand or contract to whatever is the right level of analysis for you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not saying you always have to take the unified analysis. You can take a more specific analysis, but you have the capacity to expand it
Mm-hmm.
or not expand it,
Mm-hmm.
and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what something a lot of I wouldn't say therapists, but psychologists might need to sort of accept at some point, that it's okay to have multiple levels of analysis. It doesn't always have to be you have this disease,
Mhm.
this is how we fix it,
Mhm.
this is what it is.
Mhm.
Because the presentation or the understanding or the impact of the same condition can be different for different people. I think we did a great